a pleasure to me to be here at Bellview. I've had opportunity to be associated with this congregation in a number of facets over the years, and you've always made me feel welcome when I've been here. It's kind of like coming home. You're just down-home folks, and you're dedicated to the cause of Christ, and many people have emphasized that only eternity will reveal the good that you've done, and you've done much, much good, and you've affected many of our lives. And we appreciate this lectureship and the elders' wisdom in seeing that it continues, and we appreciate Brother Hatcher's skills and ability as not only your preacher here, but in directing this lectureship and the influence that he has in so many lives with this volume of lectures. The question at hand, I've gotten all kinds of advice about how this could be preached. What part of that question to emphasize, and you stop on any word and you kind of get a different perspective of the question. Probably there's not a passage in the Bible in reference to women that you and I would know more thoroughly than we do at least portions of Proverbs 31. In particular, Proverbs 31 and verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman? In that context, we have echoed for us many, many times about this is the perfect wife, this is the perfect mother. But we don't always broaden the context to look at where the question came from and what's involved in it being presented and what this virtuous woman being described, what reason she's being described so vividly. But you know that in the context, and you began in the very first 3 verses, this is advice that a mother is giving her son. What kind of woman to look for? We don't always look at Proverbs 31 that way, do we? And so if we're to answer that question, who can find a virtuous woman? First of all, the person who will find a virtuous woman is the one who listens to the right people. How many times once you've grown older have you quoted your parent, particularly your mother? My mother always said. I do that almost daily. My mother had a profound influence on my life. The things she told me that I didn't always pay attention to, I realized were true. I should have paid attention. Many, many times I wish I had. In the times I did, I found how wise she was. In this context of Proverbs 31, listen to those first few verses. The words of the king reveal the prophecies that his mother taught him. What, my son? What, the son of my womb? What, the son of my bowels? Give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to that which destroyeth kings. And so this advice that was given to this person, he's saying, as you and I would in common terms, my mother always said, and he's passing on these sage words of wisdom to every generation. You and I receive those sage words. You and I have access to that wisdom, and so we can find such a woman. In this context, obviously this mother was not saying to her son, stay away from all women. Don't have anything to do with women at all because she is a woman. And so she is giving advice, so she would certainly want him to draw close to her. She would certainly want him to listen to her words. She would certainly not lead him away from the ways of the Lord. She would not bring him ruin in his life, so she is not talking about all women. She's talking about women who would do such things to him. Stay away from such women. Don't allow them to influence your life in a negative way. On almost a daily basis, and Brother Hatcher mentioned some of the things that I do in premarital counseling and marital counseling. That wasn't by choice. I learned early on as a preacher, people assumed you know how to counsel. And they assume that you have all the magical words. If they want to get married or they have a marital problem, they come and say, what do we do? How does this work? Generally speaking, in the premarital counseling realm, they don't want your advice. They just want you to stand before the gathering of people who are there and say nice things and don't get in the way and make sure that everything's pretty and goes all smoothly and take care of the mother-in-laws and keep everybody out of the way. That's what they really intend happen. But I don't perform a wedding ceremony anymore unless they agree to have premarital counseling. I'm going to counsel them at some point. I'd rather counsel them beforehand and give them the advice that God has given us to follow and make sure that I know that they know what they ought to do. Rather than sweep up all the pieces and try to put everything back together and get the super glue out and say, well, it doesn't look exactly like it's supposed to, but it's going to hold water. I'd rather have the opportunity ahead of time to share with them what God expects in marriage. And so we have a minimum of 5 sessions before I perform the ceremony. And then I know that they know. And then if they don't follow that advice, that's their choice. But our conscience will not bother me. I'll know that they know. You know, in the state of Tennessee now, it costs you about $95 to get your marriage license. I don't know where this came from, but in the last 2 years they have passed a provision that if the couples will agree to have premarital counseling, at least 6 sessions, then they'll knock off about $60 of that, and so you only have to pay about $35. Something tells me that those in the state government said, boy, things aren't working real well. People are not taking this seriously. So maybe if we get a little incentive and say, go and get some advice and direction. If we know they're getting it and you have to have someone sign off on that and say, yes, they came to me for this many hours, yes, they were diligent in their studies, and take those forms in, and they will knock off that price. So something is being noticed by the world that marriages are coming apart. And it's costing not only those people who are involved in the marriages, but it's costing the state and all of us who see those things happen. So first of all, we have to understand that if we are to find a virtuous woman, we have to listen to the right advice. This mother is saying to her son, don't give your strength to those women who will drain you of your strength. Don't allow yourself to be taken in by those who will deceive you. Well, most mothers desire for their sons to find women who would take care of them and protect them. They don't want their children hurt, and the same would be true of a mother or father and their desire for their daughter to marry the right person. But here we're talking about from the woman's perspective, and that is her virtue. And virtue has to do with their moral strength, their quality of life. You make sure that you find a woman who has the kind of moral strength that will not drain you of your strength. Don't give your strength away to them, because this mother obviously knew what the Lord rehearsed for us from the Old Testament passage, and he quotes it in the New in Matthew chapter 22 and verse 37. When he was asked, what's the first and great commandment? He said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. Mark chapter 10, verse 29 and 30. And so if you are to love God with all your strength, and obviously you've given away your strength to some woman who isn't helping you to live for the Lord the way you ought to, then ruin will be yours. Well, this mother knows that. I don't know of a godly mother that hasn't all along the way advised her children about the kind of mate that they are to choose. Brother Bell mentioned last night how often we are to pray for our children and the mates that they choose. As Samson's parents wanted to make sure that the child was ordered correctly. Well, there's some things that we see in his life that was pointed out last night that wasn't what they ought to be. It wasn't because his parents didn't want it for him. It wasn't because they didn't pray for him. It wasn't because they didn't offer the advice, but just simply because he didn't listen. And so we need to listen to the right people. Do you think Samson's parents, praying the way they did and working as diligent as they did, do you think they offered any advice? Well, you know specifically they did from what was pointed out last night from Judges chapter 14 and verse 5. When he, in the first verse of that chapter, went down into the Philistine area and saw this woman, this Philistine woman. He was smitten by her. And he wanted her and asked his father to fetch her for him. And his reasoning was, because she bringeth me pleasure. She looked good to him. He wanted her to be his wife, obviously not for the right reasons. Because here's his parents saying to him, can you not find a woman from among your brethren? Can you not find women from among our people? Are they not giving this son advice saying, son, that's not a real good choice? Do you have to go among the uncircumcised? Do you have to go among those who are not our people, who don't have the same God that we have, who don't have the same moral principles we have? They will drain you of your strength. And boy, in a vivid, real way, that happened to Samson, didn't it? The women that he chose drained him of his strength. He was a mighty and strong man, and the secret of his strength was given to him by God. The women that he chose caused him to give away all the secrets of his strength that God had placed on him. Well, that happened in a real way with him, with real strength. But in the context of emphasizing spiritual things, God would use him in a powerful way. I know the context of Judges chapter 14 indicates that his parents knew not that this was of the Lord. But you certainly should not read into that the Lord called Samson to make those choices. God just took a man who was going to make those choices and use it to still bring wrath upon the Philistines. But had Samson chosen to be righteous, to marry an Israelite girl, and to have the right relationship with that girl, God still could have used him in a mighty way. He did others, and he would have Samson. But because of Samson's choices, it indicates to us that he did not, first of all, listen to the right people. His parents were saying loudly and clearly, "Son, think about what you're doing." Ever said that to your children? Ever had your parents say that to you? "Son, think about what you're doing. Have you counted the cost? You know what might happen? Do you really know who you're dating? Do you know anything about a family? Do you think you could put up with this or you put up with that? Son, have you thought about it?" You see, as a parent, we know without a doubt that as diligently as we worked, as hard as we prayed, we've got to let go. That is a frightening thing. You'd like to make those choices for them. There were times when my mother said, "I wish I could just make that choice for Jerry and he would not fight against the system and that he would do those things that are right." And certainly I've done that as a parent. I've made plenty of bad choices. I did not always listen to the right advice. And so if I want to find a virtuous woman, then I have to listen to the right advice, and so it ought to be today. In Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 6 and 7, God built in a safeguard among his people. Notice the terminology used. "These words which I have commanded you this day shall be in thine heart." It has to start with that individual person. In this particular context, it was with the parents, with the adults. The word of the Lord, the commandments of the Lord were to be in their hearts, and then be based upon that, they were to teach them diligently unto their children when they sit in their house, when they walketh in the way, when they lie down, and when they rise up. You see, those principles will be taught all the time, but somewhere along the way, the children have to listen. Somewhere along the way, they have to say, "What is it that they're saying to me?" When every application of life, when the parents say, "Son, this is why we do it this way. And son, this is the kind of person you ought to be, what God expects you to be. And son, this is the kind of husband you ought to be. And son, this is the way you ought to treat your wife. And son, this is the way you ought to rear your children. These are the things you ought to teach them." And on we could go. It's a diligent effort. But somewhere along the way, the child has to listen. Proverbs 31 begins by saying this son is repeating what his mother told him. And he's prophesying, he's speaking forth, and he's sharing this message. And guess what? In 2003, you and I have that advice written down. We have it to look at, and we can understand why this mother is saying to her child, "Be careful with the women that you associate with." How many times do you tell your children, "You're going to marry who you date"? Isn't that what you're saying? Be careful. Don't get too infatuated with someone who cannot help you get to heaven. And the greatest thing that we could ever do to our children is to give them advice that will help them go to heaven. And so here we have this instruction being given. Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 9. Again, these individual adults were told to take heed unto themselves and to keep their soul with diligence, lest thou forget the thing that thine eyes have seen, and they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life. But teach them to thy sons and thy sons' sons. The neat thing about adults and parents is sometimes when children don't want to listen to their parents, the grandparents can say the very same thing in a little different tone, a little different way, and they'll believe every word of it. And they'll even drop hints every now and then and say, "Well, you know what Grandpa said, or Grandma said," and maybe saying to us in a roundabout way, "They just say it to me differently." They also reassure us that Grandma and Grandpa said the same thing we did. And that's reassuring you then. Isn't that what this passage is saying? Be consistent with those things in your life and make sure you don't forget them, and you make sure that you're diligent about them in your life. And then if you teach those diligently to your children, then nobody's going to forget, and your sons will know, and your sons' sons will know. Listen to the right people. We live in a world that gives all kinds of advice. From Dr. Ruth to Dr. Phil, you name it, they're giving all kinds of advice. If you look at their pedigree, they don't have a real good track record. And people tune in and say, that's pretty neat. I mean, they just get on there real brazenly and talk about sex openly and tell, we need to be more like that. You better check their track record. Their family life is not what it ought to be. And they don't have a clue about what they're talking about. Because they're talking about the sexuality of mankind in a humanistic way. They're not talking about the way God designed it. They bring beauty and intimacy and closeness to each other and closeness to God. They don't have a clue about the beauty that God designed for marriage to enjoy. Not a clue. But yet sometimes that's the only place people can get advice. To turn on the TV and give that. Sometimes parents will sit down with them in their house and talk about them. They don't walk in the way and put their arms around their children and say, you really need to know this. They don't always see their parents embrace and express love to each other. They see them with their arms on, hardly ever touching each other. If their hands touch, it's like, I won't do that in public. My kids see that. Well, why in the world wouldn't you want your kids to see that? If you love and care for your mate. Well, that's what's involved in teaching them when you sit in your house and when you walk in the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. My children always knew who I was going to lie down with. They did. We didn't question their mind. My faithfulness to my wife or hers to me. Well, what did that tell them? That taught them a lot. And then the words that you preach and teach, they didn't see in our relationship discontent with each other. That we wish we had someone else that looked a different way. And let's not forget to say this, and I made a note of it later in the notes, and I know I'm like everybody else, I'll run out of time. But just so we know as men, if we're talking about a virtuous woman, sometimes we adopt the world's point of view of what a beautiful woman is. And when our wives have children and they're running after them and their body's gone through the trauma of childbirth, they don't look exactly the way they did when we married them. Sometimes we show in our faces and our behavior that we're discontent, that they're not beautiful to us anymore. What a tragic thing that would be. You ought to become more beautiful to us, to know that they gave birth to our children. And they are truly, those children are a heritage of the Lord. And the Lord allowed us to have those children because of the love that we have with our mates. And so we should be more affectionate toward them. Cherish them more. It doesn't mean a woman ought to let herself go and not try to appear beautiful to her husband. But the husband ought not set the world standard of beauty on his wife. If she's caring for him and for his children, that's the context of Proverbs 31. This woman's busy. I don't know what physically she looked like. She was a virtuous woman. She had extreme beauty. I don't know physically what she looked like. But I've seen a lot of women that were beautiful to me. I've seen my grandparents and my wife's grandparents. You know, they were a little dumpy. They can make the best fried apple pies in the world. Amen. Had the best laps to sit in you'd ever seen. Beautiful women. Gorgeous women. Now, the world would not describe them that way. You know, if they can't put on the clothes that they can wear to the beach and everybody ooh and all, not beautiful. But how many marriages have gone awry because that's the kind of impression people have left because they've listened to the wrong people. That will not bring happiness in marriage. So who can find a virtuous woman? Obviously those who are looking for them and those who are listening to the right advice so that they can find them. You know, in Proverbs chapter 6 and chapter 22 and verse 6 rather, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he'll not depart therefrom. There is an attitude and disposition that you and I have to take in order to train up a child in the way he should go. We have to offer that advice, even though sometimes they may not take it. Solomon is giving advice to his son, and we are to give advice to our sons and to our daughters concerning the kind of people we are to be. And so we are to train up our children in the way they should go. In Proverbs 23 and verse 26 and following, Solomon again says, "My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She also lieth in wait for a prey, and increaseth transgressors among men." That's the kind of woman that Proverbs 31's mother is saying stay away from. The one who will cause you all this misery. And we know that Solomon's not talking about all women, because then he turns his attention and says that whosoever findeth a wife findeth a good thing. So there's a contrast between the kind of women that we are to seek out and the kind of women that have virtue. Look for those who are of strong moral character, those that are of good quality, those that have strength within themselves. And boy, you can't leave Proverbs 31 without saying, what a strong woman. She is a diligent woman. She is busy working. She doesn't seem to be complaining. Everybody around her admires her abilities and her skills. What a wonderful woman she was. And so that's why Solomon said, whosoever findeth a woman findeth a good thing. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4, "Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." You see, we have to give the advice in the same context of children. Obey your parents in the Lord. For this is right. It's right because they're giving you the right advice. If they're advising you in the Lord, that's the right advice. Listen to the right people, and you will find a virtuous woman. Oh, she may not look like your best friend's wife does. She may not look like all those women on the front of the magazine, but again, check the pedigree. Check the track record. See if there's happiness and joy involved in that superficial beauty. Obviously, we are to strive to offer the right advice for the right reason. In Titus chapter 2 and verse 11, "The grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared unto all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, that we should live soberly, righteously, godly in this present world. Be not conformed to this world, but we are to be transformed like Romans chapter 12 says we are." When you go back up in Titus chapter 2, you know who Timothy is to be sharing these words with? You know who Timothy is to tell that the grace of God that brings salvation appeared unto all men? You know who Timothy is to tell to be sober? Aged men, aged women, young men, and young women. In other words, listen to God's advice. God's given His advice, the grace of God, those gifts that we need in a spiritual way in our lives have been given to all of us. It tells us things to leave off, and it tells us things to embody, it tells us how to live, and God will seek out such to serve Him. He desires those who will diligently and zealously serve Him according to these principles. We ought to teach our children that. And the only way we can do that is embody it ourselves. You know, God knew that about Abraham in Genesis chapter 18 and verse 9. The Lord said of him, "I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord, and to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring unto Abraham those things that he has spoken of him." God knew that about Abraham. But if Abraham is giving the instructions, isn't there someone that's supposed to listen? If he commands his children, his household after him, aren't his children, his household, to listen to what Abraham has to say? You see, if we want to find a virtuous woman, then we have to listen to the right advice. Timothy's life was rehearsed by Paul, and he said, "From a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which is able to make thee wise unto salvation." If you go back to chapter 1 of the second letter that Paul wrote to Timothy, he said, "When I call to remembrance thine unfeigned faith, which is in thee, which is first of all my grandmother Lois and my mother Eunice, and I am persuaded in thee also." Well, how was it that got in Timothy? Chapter 3 tells us. From a child you've known the Holy Scriptures. You know what my very earliest memories are? The very first thing I remember is of my mother reading the Scriptures. No, she didn't at that time in my memory say, "Now son, when you grow up, this is the kind of woman you want to marry." But her reading the Scriptures in such a reverent way, every night before we went to sleep, I fell asleep every single night of my childhood with my mother reading the Scriptures. You know what that said to me over the years? Son, listen to what God has to say. Son, God has the right way. Son, find those ways and live in those ways. Son, don't stray from those ways. Isn't that what Proverbs 31 is saying? Isn't that what's being emphasized? Son, please don't make a mistake. Please don't make the wrong choices. In the way we understand that choices are to be made, who shall find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She doth him good and not evil all the days of his life. That's what a mother wants for her son, isn't it? Don't mistreat my son. Take care of him. But son, don't find the wrong woman, because she will mistreat you. She will cause you to have spoil. You will be able to trust her. So don't seek that kind of woman. Find a virtuous one. So not only are we to listen to right people, but we're to look in the right places. Our previous speaker reminded us of the evils of alcohol and the bars where that's served. You go into a bar looking for a wife, you're not going to find a virtuous woman. She doesn't reside there. That's not where she hangs out. And so we have to look in the right places, and obviously if we were going to buy costly jewels, we'd go to a jewelry store. You don't go down to the city dump and get your shovel out and back up there and start looking for a diamond, do you? That doesn't make sense at all. But sometimes in the world we go down to the beaches. We want to go to the dances. We want to go to the worldly places and say, I want to find a beautiful woman. Well, there's a difference between a physically beautiful woman and a virtuous one. This one who is virtuous will do you good and not evil all the days of your life. Someone who will go out drinking with you is not going to do you good. She will bring evil into your life. Someone who goes to the dances will find someone else who's attracted to her, and she will do you evil and not good all the days of your life. You see, we have to look in the right places in order to find a virtuous woman. There are occasions when pathetically poor moral specimens of men stumble upon virtuous women. I've seen that. It breaks my heart and breaks theirs because they're trusting. They don't pay attention like they should. It's kind of like a woman I knew in Alabama who would go around to these flea markets, and she'd buy scraps so she could make quilts. She bought 2 huge sacks of material scraps. Well, she got home and she's going through the scraps, and she found a set of diamond rings. Obviously old, but obviously valuable. She took them back to the flea market, and he said, I don't have a clue where I got them. I go around and buy from estate sales, and we get everything in the house, and so I don't know where I got them. They're yours. She went and had them appraised, and they were worth right at $3,000 for a set. Well, she had them cleaned up, and she wears them every day, and she talks about this treasure that she's found. Well, there are a lot of worthless men who found treasures that way. Somebody has abandoned them, forgotten where they put them, and they stumble upon them. And they never realize what they have. In this context, we understand that we have to listen to the right advice, and we have to look in the right places. We don't have time to look at details, so I'm going to mention it, and you can find it in the manuscript, and obviously find it in the Scriptures. But in this context, in verse 10 and 11 we've read already. In verse 12 we want to emphasize she does him good and not evil all the days of his life. Probably the best example of that is Boaz and Ruth. We're just impressed. Almost every reading that you're involved in, they want you to use a passage from Ruth chapter 1, where she says to her mother-in-law, whither thou goest I will go, whither thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy God shall be my God, and thy people shall be my people. Well, here was a woman who was obviously virtuous. And she practiced that virtue in her life. She meant every single word that she said to her mother-in-law. She didn't say that to her husband. He's deceased. She could have said, this old woman's on her own. I'm not going back there. She left there because the land of Israel was in famine. I'm not going back to that land. She lived here. Look what happened to her. She served that God, and look what happened to her. I'm not going there, but she said, I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to take care of you. She meant every single word of it. And we see when they get back to that land of Palestine, Naomi, who's older in years and can't do those things she used to do, hasn't connected with her nearest of kin to take care of her, and Ruth takes on that position. She goes out into the fields as a stranger would, which was allowed, that portion of the crop that was allowed for the strangers to go and glean from, she gleaned from. Beautiful stories recorded for us in Ruth chapter 2, where Boaz comes and asks his servants concerning who this young maiden is. Isn't that beautiful? And they begin to say, she's an old Bible woman. Her reputation's already gone. She's Naomi's daughter-in-law. And she's been here since early morning. She's only taken one break. She's gone into the house just for a little while, and now she's back in the fields, and here she still is. And when Boaz approaches her, he'll use all the vulgar, degrading comments that so many men use about the way they see women and the beauty that the woman might have in their eyes. He tells her that everybody in the city knows that you are a virtuous woman. They know the kind of person you are. And young lady, you're welcome in my fields anytime you want to. He doesn't use all the analogy the world does about, boy, I've got to have this woman. I'm not going to be happy till I have this woman. He says anyone will take care of their mother all that way, and you have access to all the fields. You don't have to glean in the edges like a stranger. He even told the young men, you let other portions of the crop fall off. You make sure she has what she needs. Why was that? Because he saw the kind of woman she was. And when he asked concerning her and gave that information, he said to her, as he answered her, it had fully been shown me all that thou hast done as thy mother-in-law. The way to find a virtuous woman is to visit her family. Discuss with them what kind of person she is. See how she treats her mother and her daddy. See how she treats other people. Spend some time learning her qualities of life. Boaz did. And he didn't run headlong after her and try to woo her. That wasn't the relationship they had at all. Oh, obviously it developed into a beautiful story of love and adoration. But it all started because of the kind of people they were. And he rehearsed and with her, and even gave charge to the men, the young men that saw after his fields. You don't let anyone touch her. You leave her alone. Why? Because this is a virtuous woman. And she was busy doing those things. And he said, it is told me that you don't run after the men. You're not out here for the wrong reason. You're doing those things for the right way, for the right reasons. Obviously, if we're going to find such a virtuous woman, we have to look in those fields of labor where righteous women reside. You're not going to find them anywhere else. This is not in the manuscript, but you can read it and know what I was trying to express. But I want to say what I've seen among members of the body of Christ that I think is detrimental to us. And I want you to take this the wrong way. But too often, we allow our terminology to become the way of life. For instance, a lot of congregations you have singles groups. And they emphasize these are unmarried people. And here's where you can find a wife or a husband. That's the worst place in the world to find a mate. Someone who's just there looking for a mate. You know where Boaz found Ruth? In the fields working. You know what I tell young people? You get busy serving the Lord in His vineyard, and you're going to run headlong, right smack dab into somebody who's busy serving the Lord in His vineyard. And you can pick up where you are and serving the Lord in the vineyard, and both of you can keep serving the Lord in the vineyard and say, I'm so lonesome. I just wish I had somebody to be married to. I'm so unhappy. But if you're married to the Lord, why in the world are you unhappy? Your Lord is not unfaithful to you. Your Lord has given you everything that you need, and a person who is unhappy doesn't make a good mate. You're not going to be able to make them happy. If the Lord can't make them happy, you won't make them happy. And the word single doesn't mean unmarried. The word single means whole, unique. Well, we never cease to be single, do we? I will always be Jerry Martin. I will never become Denise Hardin Martin. Ever. I will always be who I am. And so I will always have to be single. We need to discard those kind of terminologies. And everybody in the congregation is single. You know how I'm going to stand before the Lord as an individual, single person, and I better be whole. I better be unique, and I better be serving Him. And so if that be the case, then I'm going to listen to the right advice and the right people, and I'm going to look in the right places. Those priceless stones buried in the fields of righteousness are described in Proverbs 31 and verse 10 as a price being far above rubies. That's where the valuable people are, is in the fields of fidelity. They're faithful in their diligent work, ethics, and they will be faithful to you, and they'll do you good, and not evil all the days of your life. And finally, and ultimately, if we are to find a virtuous woman, we not only are to listen to the right people, and look in the right places, they will live by the right principle. It is unfair, it is wrong, it is sinful for worthless men to think they deserve a virtuous woman. You don't deserve it. You ought to be virtuous yourself. So many women wait on hand and foot their husband, and they sit and snap their fingers, and they never express appreciation for the kind of women they have. This woman, well, will not rehearse for you because it's familiar to you, goes and sells the wool and the flax and is a seamstress and buys land and builds up for her family and cares for the poor and is benevolent in her life. But you know what it ends by saying? Here's her husband in the gate, and he has all the respect of the elders who are sitting in the gate with him, but he also, his children, rise up and call her blessed, and her husband also. He recognizes who he has. He recognizes her virtue and her strength and her courage. And he knows that she'll take care of him and she'll provide for him, and he, therefore, is what he ought to be. He lives by those principles himself. How many men do you know? Well, my wife is the best person I ever know. I don't go to church with her. No, she's good enough for both of us. How worthless can you be? To drain her of her strength and her energy and her virtue. Everything the Lord described, we ought to be working together in our righteousness. A beautiful description of that is found in Luke chapter 1 and verse 6, where he describes Zacharias and Elizabeth. It says they were both righteous before the Lord, and they kept all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blameless. Both of them did. It didn't say Zacharias was a real good man. It didn't say Elizabeth was a real good woman. It said they were both righteous before the Lord. You see, if we're going to find a virtuous woman, we'll listen to the proper people. We'll look in the right places. And we will live by the right principles. That's a guarantee, an absolute guarantee, that you will find a virtuous woman. But if you don't live by the right principles, you neither deserve it, nor should you find a virtuous woman, because you would be a detriment to her. You would harm her and hurt her in her spiritual life. And 1 Peter chapter 3, in those first 7 verses, again, describes the mutual responsibility. A woman who has a husband who's not a Christian ought to influence him by her virtuous life, by the way that she lives. But in turn, it tells him to dwell with her according to knowledge. This man in Proverbs 31 realized that he could sit in the gate with his fellow Jewish people, and when they recognize him as having this woman full of virtue, who had all these talents and all these abilities. He went on clothes that she'd made. He had children that she had nurtured and taken care of. He shared in her reputation. And he would rise up with his children and say, "That's my wife, that's their mother, and I am glad I'm married to her. She is a virtuous woman." He sung her praises. And men, if we don't do it, pray tell me who will. We ought to echo and not say, "Well, you know what my wife does?" There's an old adage that the omelet is only as good as the eggs it's made of. And too often, those virtuous women, their influence is spoiled by the rotten egg of the husband who doesn't live by righteous principles. In Proverbs 25 verse 28, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down, without walls, no protection. Obviously, your wife is striving to work to protect you. You ought to emulate those things. I know my time is up. I'll read this to you, and then the lesson will be yours. This is something that hits home to me. I don't know who wrote the poem, but it's entitled "Tell Her So." Amid the cares of marriage strife, in spite of toil of business life, if you value your sweet wife, tell her so. When days are dark and deeply blue, she has troubles the same as you. Show her that your love is true. Tell her so. There was a time ye thought bliss to get the favor of one kiss. A dozen now won't come amiss. Tell her so. Don't act if she's past her prime, as though to please her were a crime. If ever you loved her, now's the time. Tell her so. She'll return every caress 100-fold of tenderness. Hearts like hers are made to bless. Tell her so. You are hers and hers alone. Well, you know, she's all your own. Don't wait to carve it on a stone. Tell her so. Never let her heart grow cold. Richer beauties will unfold. She is worth her weight in gold. Tell her so. Listen, look, and live in such a way that you can enjoy all the privileges that God intended for you to enjoy by serving alongside the virtuous women that He's blessed our lives with. Thank you.